Hi, good morning. This is the Gardener community meeting. Today we have two topics. Both are giving updates on the Gardener dashboard. Lukas will start, so you can take over.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I share my screen. Okay, so can you see the Gardener dashboard?
Yes. Maybe increase the font size a bit.
Yeah, I already increased it a bit.
Okay.
Try to increase it even more, but I'm not sure how this will look like.
Yeah, that's better. Huh?
Okay. So basically Peter and I will give some updates on the Gardener dashboard, things that we introduced during the last weeks. I will start with the version classification support. So as you may know, the Gardener now allows to specify classifications for versions, so for Kubernetes version as well as for machine image versions. And we now show them in the dashboard. So if I navigate to the Create Cluster page and open the version selection, then you see that we show the classifications. Here we have the supported classification, which is selected by default. But you could also select, for example, the preview version, which is, however, not recommended for productive usage. So if I select it now, you will get a hint here that indicates that this version is not yet fully tested, and you can select it, but not recommended for productive usage. And also we added information to the maintenance card, where we highlight that automatic updates will never update your cluster to a preview version. We also have now support for the expiration dates. So we already showed that in previous versions of the dashboard. We already showed it here, but we now also introduced a new warning icon. I can show it on the cluster overview, the cluster list. You see here in my cluster, I have an orange icon here with the tooltip version update warning. This is because this cluster uses a Kubernetes version as well as operating system that have both expiration dates attached. So if I click on this icon, I will get a pop over where it says that my Kubernetes version expires in 2 months, and also my machine image that I use in my worker group has also an expiration date in 2 months. And Gardener will forcefully update your cluster Kubernetes version as well as the image version if you don't update your cluster yourself in this time frame. So, and if I navigate to the cluster details page, I also see these two icons now separated for, again, the Kubernetes version and the worker groups. Of course, if you have multiple worker groups with different images, operating system images, you will get multiple, or you could get multiple error or warning messages in this place. You can also see this information about expiration when you open the update dialog. So here, for example, you get the exact date where this version will expire, as well as here in the worker group dialog, you also get the information about the expiration of this image version. And also a thing that we added on this dialog here is that you now have to confirm your changes to this dialog, regardless if you only change the worker group name or if you scale up or scale down, because we cannot ensure that these changes will not affect your workload, because worker nodes may need to be recreated and stuff. Okay. Yeah, basically that's all I have to show for the version classifications. So now we'll continue with our new popovers for the status and readiness tags. So we redesigned this popover to be more aligned with our design that we have also on the cluster details page. So with the icon and the title, and also I think this is now easier to read. And the thing that we significantly improved is that we now highlight user errors. So we already showed this user error icon here in previous dashboard versions, but sometimes I think it was not highlighted enough, because user errors are errors that usually are caused by misconfiguration of the cluster or invalid credentials. So things that a user can solve by himself and don't need operators to look at this cluster. So if I now click on this status icon, you see here that we highlight this user error problem with alert, and also show the action required title, so that we even more try to make users aware that they can maybe solve things on their own. And we also show this this information on the cluster details page in the monitoring card, so you don't even need to click on this icon. I mean, you get more information here, but you already see that there's something wrong with your cloud provider credentials. And another thing I want to show is that we also changed the dialog here, or the popover here. So it also has this new design, and we also improve the tooltips to have it more organized. And a thing that you cannot see here, but I just want to mention it, is that we also now support condition error codes. So if you have an error code set in your condition, it will appear here also with this user error icon if it's a user error, and you will also get this alert pointing at action required by the user in this popover for the readiness test. Okay, so then we now have a new improved the configuration of zones for workers. So it was already possible to add zones to an existing worker crew for shoots that do not require zone-specific network configuration. So for Azure, it was possible to add zones that were not used at cluster creation, but you could add them later. But it was not possible for infrastructures that require network configuration per zone. So for example, for AWS, it was not possible to use a zone in a cluster that was not selected during cluster creation. So I can show you that this is now possible. If I click on the AWS cluster here, you see that this cluster is currently using one zone. And then when I click on configure workers, I can select more zones. I can also use different zones in a separate worker group. And the Gartner dashboard will create the required network configuration in the background. And if you update this cluster it will expand the worker groups to the new nodes, to the new zones. So I have to mention that there's some requirements or prerequisites so that this all works. So if I show you now this cluster here, this cluster has a network configuration that does not allow the dashboard to create new news or add more zones to the worker groups. The reason is that we need enough address space to create networks for the new zones, and also this the existing networks need to follow some patterns that we agreed on in the dashboard. So basically, if you created your cluster using a Gartner dashboard, you will be able to use the zone or to add more zones. But if you created a cluster manually with a different network configuration, or if you adjusted the network configuration during cluster creation, it might not be possible. So you see in this cluster here, you have the hint that your network configuration does not allow to add more zones, and you can also not select more zones. It is, of course, always possible to try to do it manually using the YAML editor, but yeah, sometimes it will not work with the dashboard. We also have special cases where it is possible to add, for example, one more zone, but you cannot use all zones that are available for this infrastructure because your network configuration is just not allowing to split the networks so that it is possible to add, in this example, 2 more zones, but you would be able to add at least 1 more zone. So in this case, if I select now the zone 1A, the zone 1C will not be able, will be disabled. And also, of course, if I add a second worker group that now uses this 1C zone, I can also use this here, but it will not allow me to select the 1A zone. Okay, but as I said, if you only use the Gartner dashboard to create your clusters, you will never run into this issue. It's only edge cases. So then I have some small updates. So first of all, we changed the administration page. Actually, some releases ago, but I think we never showed it here. So the administration page now also has this redesigned look that uses the cards and it's more aligned with the rest of the dashboard. So it's similar to the cluster details page. And we also introduced the inline editing feature in this on this page. So it is possible to edit things like the description directly in line. And I think it's a nice feature. We maybe introduce this also on other pages for simple values for like purpose, cluster purpose, or things like that. If you have feedback, if you like this, your feedback is welcome. What else? So, okay, 2 things I want to mention. The first thing is that we now have the cluster name length dynamic. So it is now depending on the project name length. So as this is caused by Gartner, and we had a fixed project cluster name length in the previous dashboard versions, but we now check the length of the project name and calculate the maximum cluster name length. This was a feature that was what we requested because the cluster name length was limited to, I think, 10 characters. And now, for example, in this project, you are able to use up to 16 characters. Another thing we added is that we now support wildcard floating pools in the dashboard. So it is now possible to specify or select floating pools that are wildcards. So in this example, this floating pool, you can specify a suffix. We also support prefixes and also complete wildcards. And if I select this, for example, this is a non-wildcard floating pool. The input for the dynamic part will disappear. So this is a generic pattern we introduced, and we could also use it for other fields if we require it in the future. Yeah, that's all from my side, and I hand over to Peter.
Yes, thanks, Lukas. Okay. All right, so I have 3 topics. First one is the terminal shortcuts, second one the ticket feature, and the third is access restriction. And I will start with the terminal shortcuts, but before that I show a general improvement for the terminal feature. So this one is the, let's say, old behavior. So if I create a new terminal, I can select the target. So if I want to run a terminal against my cluster, for example, but I cannot change the configuration here. So if I want to have a terminal and I want to debug a node, I first have to select the cluster and wait until the terminal is open. Then I can change the settings by clicking here at the bottom or at the top right corner in the settings. And then I can choose the terminal runtime, which is the cluster, privileged mode, and then I can select the node. So, and we got feedback that this is a bit cumbersome, and this is what we improved in the new version. So this is what I show now. I create a new terminal. I have the target selection, and I can also configure the terminal with this section here. I can expand it. For the control plane, I can only specify the image, but for my cluster, I can select the runtime, the cluster, and I can also choose a node, click create, and as you can see, it's a privileged terminal right away, and yeah, it works. I can see for the processes from this node. Okay, that's it for the general improvement. And now coming to the terminal shortcuts, which started as a Friday afternoon TGF project from me. And this is, so the terminal shortcuts are like pre-configured terminals for frequently used views. And these can be configured 2 ways. So the Gardener administrator can do that. So, or the user in the project can also create their own terminal shortcuts. So let's click again on this terminals window here, and maybe you noticed it before. There is a second tab, terminal shortcuts, and here are the different shortcuts listed. So the ones that the Gardener administrator created are the ones without this project badge. And this one is a project-specific terminal shortcut. So this is a shortcut that the user from this project has created. And it has this badge and also this unverified chip. So yeah, you should only run this, the shortcut, if you, yeah, if this is, if you trust the members of the project, and yeah, you can also, of course, see what the configuration is behind that shortcut. I will show that later. So first, let's run such a terminal shortcut. I can select one here, and I can also select multiple if I want. For example, I want to see the control plane parts. I want to have a cluster overview, and I also want to see the nodes for this cluster. And let's click create. And this will open 3 terminal windows. I can also rearrange the views, of course. This is no new feature. And yeah, I can see the control plane pods in the top left corner, the cluster overview here, and the nodes on the right. So yeah, I'm using here K9s. Most of you probably know that. I also showed it in the past. Pretty nice tool. And so let's close that. And go back to the shoot details screen. And what's also new is that also on this screen, new terminals can be created by the terminal shortcuts feature. I can also see it here. And yeah, let's look at the one that the user created. Let's look at the configuration. So this is the configuration for a terminal shortcut. It has a title, a description, the target, so the shoot, or the target could be the control plane or the garden cluster. And for regular project members that do not have the operator role like I have currently, only the shoot target is possible. And I can specify an image. I could also specify a command and the arguments. Okay, so let's run this terminal shortcut. I also get like a warning message or a confirmation message stating that you should only run that if you trust this, as it could be malicious. And yeah, I run it. So this one scans. I have configured a terminal shortcut that uses the Popeye feature from K9s. It scans the cluster for potential issues with deployed resources or misconfigurations. For example, here is a pod. It's displayed as red. Let's look at it. Here it says there is an untagged Docker image in use and other reports you can see here. And what you can also do with the terminal shortcuts. So basically this terminal shortcut is valid for all clusters in this project, but you could also select specific shoots by using a label selector. So I have configured another terminal shortcut, and if a shoot has the label foobar, it will show yeah, the other shortcut. I will now label this cluster here with foobar. And there is another one. So basically this shortcut only makes sense for clusters that have this CRD deployed, network delay test. This cluster doesn't have it deployed, that's why it wasn't, the label was not initially there on this cluster. And the other cluster where this was deployed is currently not working, so I cannot show you that, but it's similar to the other. And as you can see here, there is the shoot selector with the match label section. Yeah, I guess that's it regarding the shortcuts. Any comments, questions?
Very nice.
I have one question. Which was the scan cluster command that you executed this month?
We used it in the global channel, I think.
Can you show me the other one, the scan cluster thing?
Scan cluster, the Popeye. Yeah. Popeye.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. What I haven't mentioned is how the user can configure it. So, so this terminal shortcut feature is currently open as pull request. The pull request is still open, so it's not merged yet, so it's not final. So the current way how a user could configure their own terminal shortcuts is by creating a secret containing these configurations. So we could also check the Garden cluster. And here in this namespace, there is this terminal shortcuts secret. It has a property shortcuts. You can also look at it. It doesn't contain any secret.
Isn't it better to create like a separate resource?
Yeah. It was easier first to start with that and to get feedback if the user liked the feature or not, or if it's actually used or not. And probably is better to introduce a own resource for this. But yeah, this was the easy path to first start with that, and then. Yeah,
because with this you can specify like airbag and some other.
Yeah, exactly.
Well.
Yeah. That only users with a specific role can create those shortcuts. Yeah.
So I have a question. This container, this K9's container, is it running privileged for everything?
What do you mean?
Like how is it running now? This is running in the cluster, or where is it running?
It depends on what you have selected here, what the target is. So here the target is the shoot. For example, here this one targets. Oops. What's that? This one targets the control plane, and currently I haven't exposed the privileged setting. If that was your question from the cluster. Yeah.
So this I was just asking if that container specifically is running as privileged or not. Because if it's running as privileged, then it could also do more. And also, I mean, of course, from the security perspective, is not that good, but yeah.
Yeah, of course. You should only run those that you trust. But yeah, it could be an idea to also expose this setting, the privileged setting, to the shortcut that you can do even more. Yeah.
But a very nice place to also execute networking tests. That is indeed nice.
Okay. Then I will continue with the tickets feature. So let's switch to the dev cluster. In the past, we already had this feature, but it was named differently. It was named journals, but it was only available for operators. And we've opened this feature up so that it's also usable by the regular project members, so they can create tickets for their cluster in case they have issues. And similar or basically the same as before. When you click on that, it will be redirected to GitHub, and the description is already set. You can fill it out, specify what happened, and so on, and click submit issue. And what I also want to say is that the text, the template is configurable in the dashboard. So I submit that. And we also have internally a robot, thanks to Vedran, that jumps on this issue and runs some diagnosis stuff. I guess this is a different topic. I won't go deeper on that. And on the dashboard, usually there should be automatically the ticket displayed here.
But that robot can also be triggered from the dashboard, like a shortcut or something. You can trigger the robot to run some diagnostics or something.
Via which means? What do you mean?
Via Git, so you can also, because the robot listens on Git, and then you open an issue, and then, or I'm not sure, so some way to trigger the robot to do that diagnostics from the dashboard would, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe now via the terminal shortcuts. I think
Maybe,
we might also have a separate discussion on the diagnosis that we have in, or we have Garden Cuttle on the one hand side, more for operators, and then we have the bot, and then we have these terminal shortcuts. Might make a lot of sense to consider how to bring these things together.
Yeah, to consolidate them, yeah.
Yeah. Basically nothing new here. You can see the description in the comments from this ticket. And what's new is on the all projects view, at least for the operators. So this is on the operator specific, what I show you now. This section here, that clusters are hidden from this list here that are configured with these ticket labels. So basically labels related to user errors, or if the ticket is an author action. So to better focus, so the operator can better focus on which cluster to look next, and yeah, basically those clusters are hidden. Yeah, but you can also uncheck this here and see all. Yeah. Any questions, feedback regarding tickets? If not, I continue with the next topic, which is the access restriction feature. And basically you can configure the dashboard and your club profile and seats to have some access restriction means and I have an example here for this landscape. We have, oops, this is, I'll show it locally. Create a new cluster, and there is a new section, access restriction. For certain regions, which applies, this applies for, you have this section where you have some input fields, and all the text here is configurable. And for a different provider or region where this doesn't apply, where you cannot select any access restrictions, we show this generic text here, which is also completely configurable, and which basically says that these EU access services are not available for this cloud provider in this region. And yeah, so let's switch to AWS, because for this region it applies. For the EU West region, so I can say I want to have EU access, and I also see here a description what this means. And when I select this, basically you can check the YAML. What happens is in the spec section, there is a new field seed selector, and it has this match label section, and only seeds with these labels or this cluster can only run on seeds that have this label, basically. And then I can also, if I meet the next conditions, I can get full 24/7 support for the cluster. Basically, I have to confirm that I do not store any personal data in, or any personal data is used as name or in the content of Gardener or Kubernetes resources, and the other one is that no personal data is stored in any Kubernetes volume, except for container file system, MTDS, and persistent volumes. So this is how we configured it, or would configure it for our landscapes. And let's create a cluster with this access restriction. And we see here in the details card this access restrictions. section. We also have a tooltip here again. And as you can see, the create is still pending. This is just because there is currently, or I haven't configured any seed with the label that we just previously saw. But yeah. And so let's see how it looks like when you do not meet the conditions. So you cannot guarantee that you store personal data as Kubernetes resources or in the persistent volumes and so on. Then this cluster is flagged, as you can see here, so that an operator so in case there is a problem, an operator that does not sit in EEA knows that he has to keep his fingers off in case of issues with the cluster add-ons or the worker node support. Yeah. I guess that's it what I wanted to show. I know maybe Vedran wants to add some comments to this feature. I don't know. Or if I covered everything.
I think you did. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there are no questions, I'm finished with my demo.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah.
Any more questions or comments to the speakers or any additional topics?
Yeah, maybe a question from my side. First of all, cool stuff for the EU access. When will this probably be available to stakeholders?
Yeah, I'm currently working on the configuration for our internal landscapes. So in the next few days, I guess it can be rolled out.
Excellent. Very nice.
Yeah, thanks. Okay.
Will it be possible to for existing clusters to label it with the EU access?
Yes, sure. So what I haven't shown is for the other chips here, these two, these are added as annotations. So if you add those or with false, basically, you can have the same behavior as, or I mean, you can also do it via the UI for old clusters. Yes, of course. You do not need to have a new cluster.
Okay, very nice. Thanks. So this concludes today's meeting, and have a nice weekend and see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.